All right, we're going to do a heron. And I've got my dark pencil out, so I'm hoping that you can see this. And I need to make sure that I stay in the middle of the page here. Okay, so if we look at this picture, I'm hoping this is the same one you guys have. If not, you know, whatever. It's a heron. What we're going to do is we are going to break down the shapes just like we have done in the past. I've taped up my paper here, and let's see if we can get this together there. All right. So, you know, the first thing we want to do is make sure that our drawing covers the whole page, just like the picture does, right? So, you know, I'm going to look at this shape on the side here, right? And there's this is like his shoulder and all of his wings, and I'm drawing kind of just an oval. Then I've got kind of his neck just sort of repeats that same shape. Then we've got, you know, his head, which is an oval. I make it a little smaller. And then his beak, which, you know, comes out to about there. So, you know, we can do it this way. I'll just sketch it out. You know, and now that I'm looking at this, I think his head is a little higher. Yeah, so something like this, you know, that gives you your guide for drawing in more detail. But, you know, you've got to get it on the page first, you know, and now that I'm looking at it, like, I'm seeing that this is really kind of angled down a little bit. This is all just about looking and noticing things, you know, see if you can, the more you notice, the more accurate your drawing's going to be. And it just takes practice. Okay. All right. So let's see then. If I work from here, right, I kind of know that this looks good. And I'm drawing with a really dark pencil so that you can see. So we've got this kind of little half moon shape here of blue feathers. And then a lot of, gosh, little beautiful spiky feathers here, and you know, here's the shape. We don't need to put all that detail in necessarily, but yeah, like what we're looking for is just kind of like a coloring book thing, so that we can make sure we get the shapes right. Okay, so let's look at his head. Right, the bottom of his head is actually in line. It's down a little further, right? This thing comes up, or actually, let's make that thing go up. There we go. Ta-da! Okay, just as easy. All right, so let's bring it down a little bit. And then his neck is kind of just a little bit of an oval with some spiky things going. And I think right here is like his neck kind of comes out from there. So his head also, right, we're going to do that oval. And it's kind of tucked in behind his wing a little bit, so you can sort of see it there. Let's see if we can draw kind of the blue in. Let's figure out where his eye is, kind of in relation to everything else. It's sort of right here. Almost a total circle. Such a pretty eye. Very cool. Okay, I think that's a little off. Might go a little bit higher up. Okay. And let's put in his beak. Nice and pointy. Right. There's a little line here. This kind of comes out like this. And then there's a little yellow, the white feathers go a little further over. And then that beautiful yellow beak. Okay. So we're not looking for perfection. We're just looking for something that's, you know, close enough. Okay? Close enough. Great. All right. So one of the first things I wanted to show you, if you can find them. I got one. Okay, we got a crayon. I'm going to take a little bit of the peel off. The peel. I don't know why I said that. Take the peel off of your crayon. And I'm going to try and use like a really, hard, sharp edge of this. And what I'm doing is I am going to use this white crayon to create the these long extra feathers around here. I'm not going to do all of them. I'm going to do some. Right, and our paper is dry. You can see I smudged my pencil here, but I'm going to keep turning the crayon so that I get kind of the sharp edge of it, the hard edge of it. I'm not going to use the white on here. I just want to highlight some of those white feathers, and that's going to allow us to paint. And you can kind of turn your head to see where they are, if they show up or not. Okay. All right. Okay. So let's paint. All right. Let's bring the paint over so you guys can see what I'm painting. I have not cleaned my palette. It's the same as it was for our last picture. Get my water out. Get some paper towels. Get everything ready. Yeah, and let's look at this. So we've got a couple really beautiful colors. Let's see. There's a way to get that in there somewhere. Let's try and paint that. Okay, so you can sort of see it. That's a little hard. We might have to paint it that way. Okay, well, I'm going to paint it this way so that it fits on the page, so that you guys have enough room. Honestly, sometimes it's better to paint in a different direction than you normally would, because your eye sees things a little differently that way. Okay, let's get our brushes out. So we've got our big flat, the round, and our small flat. Okay, so just have them ready. And let's grab the round brush here. And I am going to grab some Payne's Gray and maybe a little bit of Prussian blue. And I am going to start by just putting some of this down. We're just going to see what it looks like. So it's fairly dark. And if I just add a little bit of water to what I've already put on the page here, I'm going to have a nice, effect of different shades of color, and you can switch back and forth. It doesn't have to be so blue. It could be a little grayer. Add a little more water. Room on my palette. I should have cleaned it off. Okay, more gray. I'm going to clean my brush off. Put this on. We could actually put the gray underneath the blue because it's quite, the blue is quite a bit darker. Right, so we can leave a little bit of white also, and you can see this is where the crayon marks are, so it kind of just left some spiky things. Okay. And let's try going over here. Now, if I look at this gray, if you look, right, the more you look, the more you see. So here's a little bit of burnt sienna in with some Prussian gray, Prussian blue. No, sorry, Payne's Gray. And that will make more of a greenish gray. Okay. So I'm just going to put a little of that on and then grab some more water. And I'm using just like the tip of the brush to kind of make some strokes here. You know, and if I do, I see this kind of gray in here a little bit. So I'm going to go back in and add a little bit right here. And we're going to pull this up a little bit. I mean, this is just our first layer and kind of, you know, we're working kind of loose and light. Let's grab a little bit of yellow, very pale yellow, right? So if I put that down, it turned a little green. So yeah, so we'll do, we'll blot that, take it off. It was a little too wet. Here's a little yellow ochre, which is kind of a nicer yellow for this perhaps than our gamboge yellow, right? It's a little softer. Okay. So what I'm doing is just trying to make sure I don't have any hard lines on the paint here. Although, you know, we could leave a few little bits of white would be nice and helpful, since I always forget that. Let's come in. There's some yellow ochre. What I like to do if something is, you know, this works well to have this vertically because it's sort of easier to pull down as you paint. And all right, so that's a little yellow ochre. And now let's come in with some yellow, some gamboge. Right, because that's a lot brighter. Let's put a little of that in. Now, everything's going to dry lighter. We can add more of the darker colors later. All right, I'm going to put in this little yellow eye. I'm not going to worry about the black or the blue yet, right? We've got to let that dry first. Okay, so he's also got some really nice white feathers up at the top, and I think we're just going to leave them kind of white. Yeah, so we're starting to get a little bit of pretty color here, right? Let things bloom and blend a little bit. We can kind of let this dry. It might be our first layer here. Let's pull some of this out, get a little more of that gray. It's kind of cool how his feathers go a little further out along his beak. You know, what I want you to do is sort of really look at this, see what you can see as far as color goes, right? You know, add, you know, it's always good to paint with more color than you see in the picture, right? We're doing a painting. We want to make things interesting to the viewer, to the eye when people look at this. So, you know, we have to make it more interesting than the photo is what I like to do. And maybe, you know, brighter than the photo or more intense than the photo or something. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Anyway, you know, the photo is a branching off point. All right. Okay, well, let's turn them around so we can actually see what he looks like. There we go. Oh, isn't he cute? What a cute little guy. Big guy, actually, right? Big guy. All right, so what we need to do is to find my little sign. All right, gotta stop and let the paper dry. So just stop. And I'll meet you back here in a second. All right. Okay. All right. I'm hoping that we are recording again. So we've got our paper dry here. And we're going to add next stages to our heron. It's looking okay. I can paint it in sideways this time, the real way, if we want. I just want to try and get that image there for you. at the same time. Okay, let's see. Bring our paints over. So, you know, we are still using just our same 3 brushes, which are just fine. It certainly doesn't hurt if you want to get a few more brushes. But what I'm just gonna keep painting with what we, the brushes we've got, so that you know that that is possible. I mean, I want to try and put a little bit of the blue around the heron's eye, and that is going to be pretty tricky with this big, number 12 brush here. But what I'm going to do is put the blue paint at the end, and I'm going to grab some water. I'm taking the water out of the paper towel with the paper towel here. Okay. And hopefully my head is not going to get in the way here. So I'm going to use just the tip of the brush. Actually took too much water out. And I'm going to just paint around the eye. And here's a little ultramarine. Let's see what that does. I'm just, that is a little better. Kind of using what I've got on my palette here. Right. So there's a little blue here, the top of his beak. Just grab a little water. Right. Take something off if you're not happy with it. I'll put a little more blue in here. Yeah. All right, he's looking good. I kind of left this little spot here because it's kind of yellow right there, so I'll add that in a little later. Let's try the blue. Gosh, we could even, there's a couple shades of blue here, right? There's a kind of a light blue highlight and then the darker blue. So let's start by painting this, a little bit lighter. Here's our mixing cerulean and ultramarine together. Just so I have a little, the ultramarine is great, but I want just a little bit of light blue also. And we can do this more painterly, but right now we're trying to, we're kind of learning how to paint things accurately, right? So that's sort of what I like to start off with, you guys. Okay, let's see if I want to move this. I can keep making it a little bit larger. A little bigger. That's okay. You can see it's just a light blue right now, and what we'll do is we'll put a darker blue on top, but I want to let this dry first. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. We are going to turn this because it's easier to paint this way. Now just be careful that you don't stick your hand in your paint, right, in the wet paint right there, because that's a pretty common thing that I have certainly done. So what I'm doing is I'm holding my hand up above the paper, and I'm just putting this in kind of delicately, and I'm sort of trying to paint it to look like feathers, right? So I'm actually painting it, I'm trying to feather that edge a little bit because it's kind of uneven. Yeah. All right, and again, I'm starting with the light. A lighter blue, but we'll put the darker blue on later. Those are pretty. We'll wait. Let's see. It's hard to do something like this and then paint the same line over again. So that could wait. We'll see. Okay, so those guys go behind this big wing. Yeah. Alrighty. So we'll let those parts dry, but let's see what we can do for working on some of the other parts. Here's a little Payne's Gray. Now I'm still using the round brush, and what I'm going to do is kind of just start to pick out some of the darks, right? There's a kind of a few dark feathers underneath here, shadows, right, of things. And what we're trying to do is just kind of show the texture of this wing, which is really fascinating. The more you look at it, he looks, it's quite a costume he's got going there. Lovely. Something you'd see in Las Vegas, perhaps. I don't know. What? I don't know what I'm saying. Anyway, you know, all those ladies with the crazy feathers. Yeah. Okay. The white is the crayon, so that's going to stay, right? We're stuck with it. It doesn't come off, and that's all right. It gives us a lot of nice texture. And the crayon is tricky. You never know how well it's going to work. Okay. All right. So I'm using the round because I can get a nice kind of lighter line work. All right, come back here. Here's our kind of yellowy gray. Put a little bit more of that in. It's nice, gives them a little bit of tone. Okay, now these feathers are quite a bit shorter, so maybe let's try our little angled brush. Maybe we take a little water out of this. And let's see, we can do it in this direction. You can try it across. Now, if you go flat, you kind of lose everything, but you could use it, in the short direction here. I realize my hand is right above the picture, so you can't actually see what I'm doing. Okay. There's a little more. So, what I do is I turn my brush all the time, just to give myself the right kind of angle. Take a little water out, and we're just going to, kind of feather this. That's a good word. Around. And we'll do this a few times. We're trying to build up the surface, make it look like, he's covered in feathers, right? Like those ladies in Las Vegas. All right, here's a little more gray. And when it's, use the brush you like, that has the best effect for what you're doing, what you're happy with. Okay, put some little more grayish brown in here. Starting to darken it up a little bit. It's a little bluish. Okay. A little bit. Yeah. I mean, you can tap this, right? We're just kind of trying to create the texture, so however you can do it is fine. All right, I think our blue is almost dry, so I'm going to come in with some. All right, we've got some ultramarine here. I didn't know my brush, my paints, that's why I'm having trouble here. Okay, ultramarine, and let's grab a little Prussian blue also. I mean, you could use either one. All right, so what we're trying to do, we're going to start here. A little bit of this is wet, so some of it's bleeding into the other feathers, but actually that's a kind of a nice look sometimes. Right. So fancy. Okay. So I'm trying to leave a little bit of the lighter color. And I'm just going to paint some of the darker blue and leave some of the lighter blue. All right. Yeah. And some of this blue comes down here a little bit. Okay. Use the same colors for up here. I am going to turn this again because it is very helpful to paint that way. Okay. Let's see here. So a little bit darker at the bottom of this blue edge here. And you know what you want to observe is that you know, some of the feathers on you know, some of the feathers are shorter than others, right? So we can do a short brush stroke here where the feathers are shorter, and then we want a longer brush stroke where we've got some longer feathers. Okay. Let's see if we can get these guys on here. All right. Kind of so these are ones where you've got to really kind of hold the line and sort of look where you're aiming for it to go, like baseball. Okay. This is a nice look too. Maybe we'll try a little. Well, it was meant to be dry, but that's okay. Kind of looks alright anyway. Let's lighten this a little bit. So I just added a lot of water right there, which is going to give me a little bit of a bloom, which is nice. I'm going to add a little water to that too. And in fact, while we're at it, why don't we just add some water up here also? And that will soften those lines out a little bit. Okay, we're back. Poor little dog has no idea there's a pandemic on and that no one is coming to the door. All right, here's some orange. You know what? I'm sorry, we're going to switch brushes. All right, we've got this little angled brush. I'm going to have to make some more orange here. We're going to use, whoops, the gamboge. And that opera pink makes a really pretty orange. Okay, so what I'm gonna try and do here is get a little bit of texture on this also. But the the small brush will let me do a long line, and also I'm gonna try and just add a little bit of oh boy texture on here. Okay. All right. let me show you. I've got a few other brushes here. You know, this one is called, it's a number 6 brush. I also have a 4. The 6 is actually nicer than the 4, I think. But anyway, I am going to use this, to do the eye. You know, you could use a pen, actually, right? It doesn't have to be a paintbrush, but I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to get that eye on and then paint a little pupil here, right? Now he's looking that way. That's okay. All right. Now I've got this. Maybe we'll just add a little bit of line here. Okay. It's a little small, but that's all right. Right? It's always going to come out a little different. Okay. So back to the big brush. I'm going to grab a little more gamboge. And I'm going to put a layer of brighter yellow on this. So I really want it to show up. Okay. And I can see there's a tiny bit of yellow on him also. Not nearly as bright. But I'm going to add that. Oh, and I've got a bit of a bloom going right here. It's kind of bleeding a little bit. So I'm just going to come back in. Excuse me. Maybe we'll blot that a little bit and see what happens. So lost some color there. We'll put it back on. Or maybe we let it dry. But what's nice is, you know, the look right here is coming out quite nicely. Let's see if I can zoom in on it. Oh, yeah, he looks cute, right? Excuse me. So you can sort of see, you know, this is drying unevenly, and I've left a little bit of the white, you know, the lighter blue marks, and you know, we've got some kind of washes going there, which is great. Okay, let's go back out. Okay. So let's come in, let's make it a little darker on his neck. We'll try to get this, right now he's a little flat. So first of all we want a little something underneath his chin. Okay. Right, and then a little bit here, I'm thinking. So I put some down. It's obviously too dark. And what I'm going to do is we've got some water, just water in my brush, and I'm going to kind of feather it up. Right, so that we leave, you know, the darker line kind of underneath his chin. Let's see, I think we might need a little bit back here too. Kind of show that you know, his wing is in front. So I've just drawn some, you know, a line almost, and I'm adding some more shading here. Just little lines that are kind of indicating the feathers, but they're also slightly darker. So that pushes that back now, and his wing comes forward. Okay, so that's all about, that's, you know, light and dark. Usually dark kind of goes back and looks like something's in shadow, and the lighter things come forward in the picture. Okay. It's a little too dark, but that's okay. Add a little more water. And let's put a few little dark shadows in here. Okay. Now we left the top of his head. do it over on this side here. I'm actually going to bring it out a little further. You can pretty much leave it white. It just needs a little bit of color. And then we'll do the background. You know, we can keep coming back to the bird here. But let's let this dry. And I'll show you some fun tricks for the background. I think we're going to use some salt. All right, so in preparation for that, get yourself some table salt or kosher salt, whatever you've got. And we're going to sprinkle it on the paper and give it a look that's interesting. Let's hope. Okay, let's pause this for a second. Okay, again, let's let this dry. Okay. Okay. We're back, I hope. I've got a little bit of salt over here. I think this is just table salt, so let's see what that does. So, you know, this background can be anything. We don't have to necessarily make it look quite like this, but I kind of was thinking about maybe putting some water behind him. So what I'm gonna do is wet the paper around the bird. Just get everything wet. That's one section. Yeah, use your big flat brush. You know, you don't want to get the bird wet, right? So you want to, you know, be careful with your edges when you're painting around here, right? Just try and get this smooth as you can with the water, and that will give you a smooth edge when we put the paint down. Okay, so nice and wet. This looks like I'm using rough paper here, so there may be a couple pieces that you guys have that have a little bit more of a texture. I'm going to grab some Payne's Gray. Well, and that's Prussian. That's a little more gray, and we're going to make up a bunch of it, right? We want you don't want to run out, so we're going to make a little puddle of gray here. And we're going to start at the top. I'm going to, you know, my brush is fairly wet. And what I want to do is kind of just go around with a streak of it. And then I'm going to actually leave a space in between. I'm going to put another one in here. More. Maybe get it a little darker underneath his beak. It's okay that it's feathering out. That's kind of what we want it to do. You know, the background here is out of focus, so we don't want it to really show up as much as, you know, it's not going to be in focus. All right. So we've got a couple of lines going in here. Maybe grab a little cerulean. Let's see. Let's add a few of those in there too. Let's make feathers right there. Yeah, that's kind of pretty. A little cerulean. Okay, this is all still very wet. So we're just putting a couple of those in. And before it dries, right, as you can see it's shiny, right? So it's a very, very wet, almost drippy. Getting a little bit of a puddle right here. So we can pull things, you know, turn it, have it kind of go vertical. So you can get the, you just don't want a puddle right in the middle. Let's grab those guys, and I'm also going to try and just feather that out a little bit more. Okay, and then we're going to grab some salt. So this is just regular, very thin, small grain table salt. You can put it kind of all over the background. What I'm going to try and do is sort of put it in a little bit of a line. And, you know, what we'll do is the salt soaks up the water and sometimes leaves kind of like a little crystallized look on the paper. But it takes quite a while for it to dry. And you have to kind of leave it there, right? So it's once the salt goes on, you don't want to lift it up or anything. It just needs to dry flat. So let's see how this goes. We'll see how this works. It may, depending on the humidity of the day, it could take all day to dry. You can try the hair dryer. You just don't want to blow the salt off your paper. But we'll see how that goes. And let me show you. I've got a couple other versions of this picture, and I'll show you here. This one was definitely done with the crayon, you can see. And I did kind of a darker background, and it's got the salt on it, so you can see sort of the texture. You know, these were just demonstrations. It's not, it's just a okay painting. It's good. It's fine. This is, we're just practicing. But here's one version. Here's the version with salt. This is a slightly different photo, I think, that we were using. But this is what the salt can do on the background. You never know. The salt always comes out differently. So it's going to be, it's a mystery. We'll see what happens when it comes out. This one, I used some masking fluid instead of the crayon. You can see it's quite a lot smoother. I like both. I think the crayon works great. And actually, this guy's got some crayon on his beak. But, yeah, see, that's fun. And I think we got another version here. Right, so... everything's going to be different depending on what you do with the background, the colors that you choose to use, the brush you choose to use. And it's just practice, so the more you do it, the better you get, right? This one's got a lot more color in it, a lot more yellows and kind of brown and almost a little purple. So, yeah. All right, so experiment, and I'll catch you back here later. Hi. Here is my heron all dried. Anyway, the background is dried. Oop, there's a little bit more salt on there. I usually use you can use a butter knife. I usually use a plate pie server and do that over the kitchen sink, right? Just to get all that salt off. So it's got to be all dry before that happens. And so now, we got this kind of interesting background that sort of looks like something, winter, something's happening. And I want to go in and maybe touch this guy up. Now, I told you that you can erase your watercolor, your pencil lines, if you're unhappy with them, right? So I like to use this white eraser rather than the brown kneaded erasers. You can try them both. This one seems to be easier for me because I can really scrub here. All right, and I am just taking off, a couple of lines. Get all that stuff out here. have to vacuum later. Rats. Okay. But, you know, you can get most of them off. Leave them. If they don't come off, don't worry. So what I want to do now is just give this a little extra detail, right? We're almost finished. But now that the background's in, we can kind of judge the bird, what the bird needs. Okay, so here's my paint, and hopefully you can see everything. All right, let's put the bird right in front here. All right, again, I'm going to turn it to paint it, I think. We'll see. So I want to get, you know, a little more color in here, I think. I think I'd like to make his feathers a little darker. I'm coming in with, this is some Prussian blue. Oops. All right, grab a paper towel if you need it. All right, I'm gonna take a little bit of water out of the end of my brush, out of the base, so that I have my paint is at the tip. And I'm gonna come in, and we're just gonna try and we're gonna add another layer of darker blue in spots. This is all dry right now. What I'm trying to do is leave the lighter blue on top, very similar to how we painted that rooster. Okay. So I'm going to come in and we're going to add a little more. You know, you can add a little Payne's Gray to the Prussian blue to make it a little darker. And, you know, I'm trying to paint in the way that I'm watching the feathers. I'm looking at the feathers and how they lay on his shoulder here. So I'm just very gently going around it. All right, and let's darken up. We're going to turn him a little bit. I want to get the feathers a little darker down here too. Sometimes I hold my pinky out, kind of like just so that I'm not leaning on the paper. And I'm trying to do, we're just doing little short strokes right here. We're going to make these guys a little longer. Ooh, and we're going to try and see if we can repeat those lines right on there. All right. Yeah. All right, so let's have a look at him, see what he needs. Often, this is the time that I'll turn my picture upside down and have a look at it and see what I'm missing. I can see right away this line is quite a bit darker. So I'm going to grab some, I've got blue on my brush, and I'm going into the burnt sienna. So it's got a little bit of Prussian blue and burnt sienna together. Makes a nice kind of gray here. All right, put that on, and then I'm going to clean my brush out. Use some water. And just move that down a little bit so I only have a hard edge at the top, rather, you know, underneath his chin rather than all over. And that looks like a good color to give me a little bit of shading in here also. So again, it's a little smaller. His feathers are shorter over here on his neck. Okay. And I like that color, so I'm going to come in and I'm adding, it's a little more of a brownish gray. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to add more here just to give him a little more pizzazz. Okay. Come in and get some nice darker, slightly darker shadowing in here. Yeah, not all over, just a few. And you can see it still goes underneath the crayon because the crayon's on there. There's no way to get the crayon off. So sometimes, you know, we like using that masking fluid. This is a masking fluid that we like. It's called Pebo drawing gum, and you can get it online. And I'll show you how to use that next time around. It's kind of fun. All right, well, let's get a couple more dark ones down here. Because we really want some contrast, right? We want them to show up. We've made a gray background that's very similar to the color of the bird. Excuse me. And so we want to make sure that he stands out a little bit. Okay. I think we're going to need a little here too. All right, let's add some here. Ooh, the line on his beak. Let's give him a little line around to the blue. We need a little dark, kind of reddish brown for his nice little nostril there. Okay. I just used the reddish brown on the darker blue feathers. It's looking okay. But now I got to put it on kind of everywhere I need it. All right, let's have a look at him. Turn him back over. Yeah, his eye's a little too small. That's okay. You know, could make it bigger. We could if you want. Let me see. If you're unhappy with something, right? Let's grab, I've got our little flat brush here. So if I want to try something over again, I'm kind of just using the corner of this brush, and I'm using just water. And I'm very gently scrubbing a little bit. And I'm going to blot it with a paper towel. And that's going to let me get a little bit of the paint off. Right. Yeah, the yellow's on there. It's kind of looks. They have there's a thing called staining colors, and you know generally if you're analytical, right, you can actually look at the tube of the paint, and I think sometimes it says whether it's a staining color on it or not. Otherwise, it's just trial and error, which is what I usually do. And you discover something's a staining color when you can't get it off. So our purple, our dioxazine purple is a staining color. Anyway, we'll let that dry, and I'll give his eye another go. After it's dried, right? We got to get it to dry first. Yeah, and you know, if there's anything that you're not happy with, like I've got a little bit of the line, I lost, he's got his feathers sticking out, a little blue feather sticking out. So I can scrub a little bit and blot it. You don't want to scrub too much, right? You don't want your painting to look like you scrubbed it. That's the key. Okay. You know, and I can go back in and add more line on the beak. It's all a matter of like how much you notice while you're painting, right? So the key we're trying to do is sort of teach ourselves how to look at something, how to notice all the details. So, you know, the more you look at something, the more you notice. Like he's got this little bit of, you know, white downy something on his bill. And, you know, I'm not going to worry about that, but, you know, you could try and put it in if you want. I'm going to darken the orange a little bit more. Maybe try a little more yellow down at the end here. Make it nice and, you know, kind of a little bright so it shows up. We'll try putting yellow on his eye again. Just took it off. We'll try it again. Let's try it again. That's better. I had a little green or something, orange in the yellow. It's too orange. And I'm going to make his eye a little bigger. See if we can get it to show up a little bit more. If you look carefully, it's actually not a perfect circle. It's kind of flattened on the edges. That's the kind of stuff that I like to notice. But it takes a while. I don't see stuff. I don't see everything ever, or, you know. Okay. Fun. You know, in my background, I've got a little bit of a straight line here. I'm not going to worry about that. We'll just leave it. You know, I painted as close as I could to the edge of the bird. If I want, we could try and darken. You know, now we've got all the salt off this, and it is dry. So the thing about the salt is you don't want to go over it too many times because you'll lose the cool texture that you've created. So I'm trying to get a really wet brush here, and I'm gonna use that to kind of come up here and get a little closer to the beak and just add a little darker background right around his beak. Now this is just water now. So I'm just taking the water. I don't want to straight, you know, I don't want it to dry with a line on it and a bloom. So I'm just bringing the water across. I'm not scrubbing or anything. I just want it to be slightly darker. So let's see here. We can come up and, you know, I want his beak to show up a little bit more. Come through. Here's another line, right? If you want a narrower line, you can kind of angle the brush. Okay, this is now just water. So I'm just hitting the edge where I had just put the paint on. And I'm going to bring it all the way up. And we're going to do the same thing here. I'm just going to use a little water in between those two lines, just to soften that. Okay. So I've made it, you know, slightly darker, so he pops out a little bit more. That's all I wanted to do. Not dry yet, so we'll have to wait on his eye. But yeah, I think he looks pretty good. So let's wait. Let's end there, and I'll show you what he looks like when I get his eye in. But